So how do we actually know what we know? In science, we're always building new discoveries on top of old ones, kind of like a skyscraper reaching for the clouds. But what happens if that foundation is a little shaky? Today, we are going to explore a really powerful tool for making science totally rock solid, the replication study. And you'll see how it's becoming a secret weapon for training the next generation of scientists. Okay, let's just dive right in with a pretty wild question. Can scientists actually feel the future? I know it sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but this was the central claim of a very real and, well, very controversial scientific paper. So back in 2011, a study by a psychologist named Daryl Bem came out, and it claimed that people could actually sense future events. A shocking claim, and it made huge waves. But then, other scientists tried to repeat the exact same experiments, and they found nothing. Poof. The effect just vanished. This wasn't just about one strange study. It was a huge wake-up call, highlighting what a lot of people now call the replication crisis in science. So what were those other scientists doing? They were conducting a replication study. And it's a really simple but powerful idea. You just redo an experiment to see if you get the same result. You know, it's not about proving someone wrong. It's all about validation. Think of it as the ultimate quality control for scientific knowledge. It's how we make sure the ground we're building on is solid. All right, here's our game plan. We'll start by looking at that shaky foundation. Then we'll step into what's called the replication classroom to see how students are learning by redoing. We're going to cover the mentor's critical role, a big obstacle called the publishing hurdle, and finally, how this all comes together to strengthen science from the ground up. So while replications are obviously essential for checking facts, a new idea is gaining a lot of ground. What if they're also the perfect training ground for new scientists? I mean, instead of just throwing doctoral students into the deep end and telling them, go invent something new on day one, what if they started by carefully, meticulously reconstructing someone else's work first? And this isn't just a theory. This quote comes from Annalot Wismans, who actually started her PhD this way. For her, it gave her a clear goal and a fast start. So instead of that immense pressure to be a genius right out of the gate, she got to learn the entire research process, the whole shebang, on a project that was already defined. And the best part? It didn't slow her down. It actually gave her the tools to create much better original research later on. So what are the powerful lessons that students are actually learning here? Well, this hands-on process builds 4 key skills, 4 pillars of a really deep education in science. First, they absolutely master research design. Then they learn the subtle art of interpreting complex results, which is way harder than it sounds. But it goes deeper than that. They figure out how to innovate with a real purpose. And they get this incredible front row seat to how science actually moves forward, warts and all. Now, it turns out not all replications are the same. On one hand, you've got exact replications. Think of these as perfect copycats. You do everything exactly the same to see if a finding holds up. That's what happened with that Feeling the Future study. But then you have constructive replications. And this is where things get really creative. Here, you intentionally change one little thing. Maybe you study a different group of people or use a new measurement to see how far the original idea can stretch, to test its boundaries. And this story brilliantly illustrates just how powerful that can be. Back in the 1970s, a PhD student named John Child set out to replicate the super influential Aston studies. Now, these studies argued that an organization's structure was pretty much determined by outside forces. But Child's constructive replication, it found different results. And, drawing on his own work experience, he had this breakthrough moment. The original theory was missing a huge piece of the puzzle. Managers. Managers make choices. They have agency. This single insight, born from a replication study, helped launch the entire field of strategic management. It wasn't just a fact check. It was a revolution.
Of course, a breakthrough like that doesn't just happen in a vacuum. A student on this kind of journey needs a guide, right? Someone who really knows the landscape. That partnership between student and mentor is absolutely essential.
A great mentor in this situation is part coach, part strategist. They help the student pick the right study to replicate, one that's actually impactful. They have that tricky wisdom of knowing when to offer advice versus when to just let the student struggle and learn. And maybe most importantly, they help frame the final results as a constructive contribution to the field, not as some kind of attack on the original research. But here's the thing. Even with the best mentor and the most interesting results, student replicators run headfirst into a massive wall. The academic world, and especially the top journals, they have this powerful bias for novelty. They want what's new, what's shiny, what's flashy. And a study that basically says, hey, we just redid an old experiment, well, that can be a really tough sell. And this quote from an experienced scholar, it just lays the problem bare. It's so blunt. There's this painful conflict. What's good for science as a whole, validating our foundations, might actually be bad for the individual scientist who's just trying to build a career. If you're a PhD student and you need publications to get a job, being told that the field doesn't value this kind of essential work, that's a crushing blow. So what does this mean? Are we really telling students to perform this vital service for science that could simultaneously torpedo their own careers? I mean, really, is replication a dead end? Well, not necessarily. The good news is a new path is being forged. Students and their mentors are getting really smart, developing clever strategies to get over this publishing hurdle and get this essential work the recognition it absolutely deserves. You see, success isn't about just submitting the paper and crossing your fingers. It's about smart positioning. Students can frame their work as a deeper theoretical contribution, just like John Child did, or they can bundle multiple replications together to present overwhelming evidence. And critically, they have to position the work as a helpful, constructive addition to the conversation, not some kind of hostile takedown. And the proof is in the pudding, as they say. Look at this. The tide is slowly but surely turning. These are some of the most prestigious, top-tier journals in management. We're talking the places where careers are made. And they are publishing replications. So while the challenge is definitely real, a path forward does exist. It's opening up. And this brings us to what might be the most important takeaway of all. We really need to stop seeing this as a choice between doing a replication or doing original research. The experience from students like Annalot Wismans shows us that it's a sequence. It's replication, then better original research. Doing a replication first is like a learning accelerator. It gives students the skills, the context, and the confidence to produce much higher quality original work down the line. In the end, it all comes back to that skyscraper. Science is about reaching for the sky, building these ever taller structures of knowledge. But we can only build high if we have absolute confidence in the ground beneath our feet. And maybe, the act of strengthening that foundation, of carefully testing, validating, and solidifying what we think we know, maybe that isn't some boring chore. Maybe, just maybe, it's the most important and the most original work a scientist can possibly do.